We can proceed with the next speaker, who is Barbara Mazzolai. Hello, Barbara. Great
Hi.
to have you with us.
Hi there.
And
good evening.
So Barbara Mazzolai is a biology with a PhD in microsystem engineering and an international master degree in eco-management at the Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna di Pisa, and is Associate Director for Robotics and Director of the Bioinspired Soft Robotics Laboratory at the Istituto Italiano di Tecnologia in Genoa, Italy. Her research starts by studying animals and plants, which aims at developing robots that imitate their functions for environment exploration and monitoring. She created the first robot inspired by plant roots, the plantoid, and coordinates several European projects on bio-inspired robotics, including GrowBot and iSeed. Since May 2021, she has led the iWood project funded by European Research Council, ERC, which aims to develop smart robots that can monitor the health of the underground environment. Her books include La Natura Geniale, The Genial Nature, and in 2019, and Il Futuro Raccontato dalle Piante, which just came out, and we have some copies at the bookshop. She will talk today about a topic from nature to nature, a vision of plant-inspired soft robots for the planet. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Giovanna, for the kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen. So please let me know if you can see the slide. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Giovanna, for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased to be part of this interesting event. I apologize not to attend in person, but in any case, it's a great pleasure and opportunity for me to share with all of you what we are doing in my lab on bioinspired soft robotics. So this is my research lab, my research area. And so our approach is, in fact, to take inspiration from living organisms. So in particular, we are investigating their capability to adapt to very unstructured environments and dynamically changing conditions. And then we translate such features into specification to design robots that are able to move, to operate in similar conditions, help humans in different scenarios, in particular for manipulation and grasping, for exploration monitoring, as well as for environmental protection. But since these robots are deeply based on bioinspiration, so are designed starting from principle in biology, sometimes they can be used to validate hypotheses on the biological systems that we take as models. So the final goal is to improve basic science and to make innovation. And in particular, our models are soft animals like invertebrates and plants. And today I would like to focus my talk on plants and their features, in particular, how we are developing a new generation of soft robots able to move by growing, starting from plants. And in this field, in fact, some years ago, as Giovanna already mentioned, we developed the first robot worldwide inspired by plants, in particular by plant roots for soil exploration, in particular useful for agriculture and environmental monitoring. But I have to say that when I proposed this idea to the robotics community in the beginning, it was not really simple and easy. And I think that, in fact, there is a sort of prejudice towards plants, because in this case, when we are thinking about robots, robots has to move, they have to perceive the environment, they have to show a certain level of intelligence, and all these features normally are not attributed to plants. And this prejudice has its foundation in the past. in his book, De Anima, Aristotle talk about plants as a vegetative soul. So the vegetative soul has a capacity for growth or for reproduction, but doesn't have a capacity for sensing, for reacting to sensing feedback or for a rational thought. And high up on the scale, animals have a sensitive soul, so they can perceive the environment, they have a rational soul, and humans have all this capability as well as intellect. And many centuries later, in the middle of the 18th century, John Ellis, that was a famous naturalist, studied the movements of carnivorous plants. In particular, he was really fascinated by the movement of Dionea muscipula, the Venus flytrap. So this carnivorous plant closes its leaves in less than 1 second, in 100 milliseconds, when a potential prey touches at least 2 tactile hairs inside the leaves at the distance of about 30 seconds. And this is the internal control that had been selected by the natural evolutionary process with a higher probability that the prey is inside the leaves. And so this carnivorous plant, in fact, extract nitrogen from animals, because in the environment where they live, there is a poor quantity of nitrogen in soil. And so John Ellis described such a movement in a letter for Carl Linnaeus. Carl Linnaeus, as you know, was an eminent scientist. He was known for the classification of living beings, and still now we are using the binomial classification by Linnaeus. And in this letter, John Ellis described this closure, the movement of this Dionea muscipula, as a perfect rat trap with the teeth. But the reaction Carl Linnaeus was quite, in some way, limited. And he said that the idea of an insect-eating plant was ridiculous, and it was contrary to the God-given rules of nature. And in some way, he limited the study of plants as a natural organism and relegated them as a source of food and ornamental subject. And in fact, also many years later, Charles Darwin, that wrote many works and books on plants, on their movement, their perception capability, their intelligence, was warned about the perception, the comments from the Linnaeus followers, and in fact waited for a while before publishing this book, and he named, instead of carnivorous, he named insectivorous plants. By the way, this was a great success. This book was a great success. And I think that our perception, plants, this limited view of the capability of plants is probably also due to the problem of time scale. So many movements of plants for us are too slow, so we need to accelerate them, or others are too fast for us, like the Utricularia australis, another carnivorous plant. This movement we have to decelerate. And so probably the fact that we cannot perceive their movement is also part of the reason for our prejudice towards plants. But in fact, the plants move. They move continuously. Many of the movements are associated to grow capability. So they move by growing, adding new cells in the apical regions, so in the shoot and the roots, and then by growing, they adapt their morphology, their bodies to the external condition, what is called in biology plasticity, so they show very high plasticity. So they perceive the environment, and very important, they also communicate with other plants, but also with other organisms. And so what we are trying to do is translating all these features into robotics, as I said, platform and technologies. In particular, we start from the analysis of the plant roots movement in soil, into the soil. And so soil can be considered as an extreme environment because all in centimeters plants root grow from the tip, so they add the cells, absorb the water from the environment, and the only part that is able to move in soil is the tip. The rest of the body doesn't move, so there is no friction. And at the tip level, root has sensors capability, so they perceive gravity, humidity, chemicals, they can avoid obstacle, and the growth is associated to this perception capability, so plants roots can grow following or escaping from environmental stimuli. And so this is one of the version of the robot that we have developed that is able to move by growing. So in the tip of the robot, we have a miniaturized 3D printed machine. So there is a motor that pulls a filament from a spool, a thermoplastic material. And so this material enters inside the tip where there is a resistor that reaches a high temperature for a few seconds. The material becomes sticky, and the new layer can adhere to the previous one. So layer by layer, the robot is able to create its own body. And the direction growing of the robot is given by the sensor integrated into the tip, and also the behavior associated, so like in the natural root. So we also imitated the passive adaptation, the natural root, so given by exploiting these melting properties of the material. So as you can see, the robot, without any control, can adapt the morphology to the external environment. This is very convenient when we need to reduce the energy consumption. But very important, roots in soil have to bend to follow or escaping, as I mentioned, from environmental stimuli. And so in order to bend, the natural root can add more cell in one side with respect to the other side. And in this way, we have a differential growing. And so we imitate such a differential growing by controlling the velocity of the deposition of our filament. In any case, also our robot can bend into the soil. But if we observe also another creature that is able to move in soil, like the earthworm, it's very fascinating because we can see that legless creature that move in soil implement very similar adaptation strategies. So also in the earthworms, when the animal is inside the soil, the only part that is moving is the head and the first segment in order, again, to reduce the friction, as I mentioned before. And both the earthworm and the root enlarge the diameter when the impedance, when the resistance of the soil increases, in fact. And this is the way in which this living system create a crack into the soil and then move inside them. And so this is the version, the earthworm robots, the soft robots that we have developed to move inside the soil for soil exploration. And in terms of application, as I mentioned, the goal is to develop autonomous robots that move in soil for agriculture environmental monitoring. This is the case of the project funded by the Tuscany region, in which the goal was to measure parameters like temperature and humidity in the first centimeter of depth in a vineyard. And so in an autonomous way, the robot can provide humans operators with some information about the status of the environment. But very important, as I mentioned at the beginning, our robot can be also used to validate hypotheses in biology. In fact, by simply comparing two identical systems, one that is pushing from the top and the other one able to grow from the tip. In the second case, the system is much faster, more than 40%, and more efficient from an energetic point of view, more than 70%. So even if, of course, the system is not identical to the root, the natural root in terms of material, in terms of dimension, but in this way we validate why, and we demonstrate why also the natural root has to grow from the tip. But the natural roots perform many tasks, and they are able to go beyond the single organism. This is very important, and we already mentioned also in the previous talk the importance of symbiosis. And the roots are able to create a symbiosis underground with the fungi, and this is fundamental for the fertilization of soil, but also for the biodiversity in the soil. In fact, plants provide the fungi with the sugars, and the fungi provide plants with the nutrients, in particular phosphorus and nitrogen. But more recently, scientists also discovered that this underground network, also called the World Wide Web, are fundamental to exchange signal among plants. So plants communicate in case of attack by enemy, by parasite or insect, by using this network. So the signal travels in the network. And also it seems that this network is fundamental as a storage of carbon, in particular CO2, and as you know, this is fundamental to reduce also the global warming. So it's evident that we need to protect this very fundamental ecosystem. And our idea in this project is to develop artificial World Wide Web based on the rules of the natural network, in particular how the topology of the network that dynamically change on the basis of the external perturbation and the external feedback, and then we translate into artificial system and artificial network that can be used and applied for many different applications, and a new version of the plantoid that not only detect the parameters into the soil, but also release a substance like spores of water or chemicals to facilitate the presence of such a symbiosis. But we are also investigating growing, not only in roots, but also in the shoot. In particular, this is the case of the climbing plants. They are quite peculiar plants since they use most of the energy that they have to grow faster with respect to the other plants towards light. But of course, in order to avoid to collapse under their body, under their weight, they need to anchor the body. So they develop tendrils, adhesive pads, spines, hooks, and so on. And so our idea is to implement such features in the robot, in particular also the capability of the robots, and so by imitating the natural plant, to find the support without vision. So by using other sensory capability. By imitating these anchoring features, we are developing artificial technology. So this is the case of the Gallum aparin. This is a climbing plant, it's a parasitic plant. Since use the hooks that cover its leaves to attack the leaves to the leaves of the hosting plant and to be better exposed to light. So our idea was to analyze the anatomy and the material of such hooks, in particular the hooks used in the ventral part that the plant uses as a sort of a racket, and we develop artificial devices like adhesive tap that we attach, for example, to mini car, like in this case, and only when the hooks are attached to the wheels, the mini car is able to climb over a 45 inclined plane with a different material. But very important, this is our challenge now, is to develop devices, like in this case, that by using the hooks can be attached to the leaves of natural plants in order to detect in situ parameters like temperature, humidity, also light, that are very important to have an idea of the status of the plants. So if there is a stress of water or other condition. And so the goal is to develop also some soft patch that we can attach to the leaves in order to release drugs or molecules directly on the plant tissue, the vascular tissue, in order to move towards a sustainable agriculture. So this is our idea in order to reduce the use, in some cases the abuse of a substance like a fertilizer or herbicide that then become pollutants into the environment. And in particular, they can contaminate the environment, the water, and so on. So the robotics, the bioinspired technology can really help also in improving the quality of the ecosystem. In particular, such devices are biodegradable, so after a while they are degraded by the external condition. And this is exactly the idea that we want to implement in our robot. So our idea is to develop robots that will be more and more integrated into natural ecosystems. So robots that act into the environment, help humans harvest their energy, grow and adapt their morphology, but then after a while they disappear because they are biodegradable or reusable. So we want to introduce the concept of cycle of life also in technology. But none of this would be possible without the help of my collaborators. They are young researchers and students that come from different countries, from different disciplines. So this is the way in which we learn from each other. And this is a really exciting, and this is the way and why I want to thank all of them, and of course all of you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.